Sorry. We're going to begin with prayer. So if everyone would like to join us in the name of the Father and Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear God, we pray for these panelists, that they may share their stories, and that their voices may be heard, and that this webinar will reach as many people as possible and spark future change in those beginning their college journey. In your name we pray, amen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this Climate Action After High School panel today. We've got great speakers here with us today. First, the facilitators are going to introduce ourselves. We are all recent high school graduates, and then we will be introducing the speakers who are in college themselves. And then we're going to ask them questions that we've come up with, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A from the audience. So thank you for joining us, and I'll go ahead and start to introduce myself, and then I'll pass it on to our other facilitators. My name's Elizabeth Johnstone. I'm from Santa Monica, California, which is near LA, in LA. And I just graduated from Harvard Westlake School. And after high school, after this summer, I'll be headed to Princeton in the fall, where I hope to study public policy or political science and pair that with an environmental studies minor. My involvement with Catholic Climate Covenant started with my parish, the Green Team, and we met the Catholic Climate Covenant and Kayla at our Youth Climate Summit, where we help middle and high school students learn how to create green teams and environmental ministries at their own schools and their own parishes. So I'll pass it off to Annalise.
Hi, I'm Annalise. I'm from the Chicago suburbs. I just graduated. I'll be attending Middlebury College in the fall, which is in Vermont, and studying environmental science and chemistry with a minor in Spanish. I got involved with the Climate Covenant about like 3 years ago. I've been on the youth leadership team for our area's Youth Climate Summit for 3 years. Yeah, we've held three summits where we help train and educate students in taking green initiatives at their schools. I'll pass it to Alejandro.
Good evening, folks. My name is Alejandro Baez. I'm a recent graduate of St. John's Prep in Danvers, Massachusetts. I'll be attending in the fall the College of the Holy Cross, where I will hope to study political science and international studies with a focus on Latin America. I first got involved with the Covenant through the Boston's leadership team, the inaugural Boston's leadership team, where we also hosted a summit. We were also able to kind of partnership with different organizations and lobby in Boston State House. So that was a great experience and a great way to get involved this year with the Covenant. We will now begin with uh, introducing our panelists, and I'll pass it to Elizabeth to start that off.
Awesome. Yes, awesome. So I'm going to introduce Paco Estrada. Paco is a first-generation Mexican-American born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. He is in his final year at Loyola Marymount University, pursuing degrees in theological studies and Spanish, with an emphatic desire to one day serve his community by fighting for social justice at the institutional and political level. This summer, Paco is working as an intern for U.S. Senator focusing on environmental policy. For the following year, he will continue his role as a Common Home Corps leader. In his free time, Paco enjoys binging Netflix shows and movies, bopping his head to Latin music, and enjoying the great outdoors. And I can just say I've had the honor of meeting Paco and Jess with the Common Home Corps through my church, and I'm so excited to have Paco as a panelist today. I'll pass it to Annalise.
Hi, so I'll be introducing Becca Storey. Becca is an organic vegetable farmer in South Bend, Indiana. She graduated high school in 2017 and worked on a Catholic worker farm for 2.5 years in Illinois serving expectant mothers and honing her skills in the garden. Becca started working for her older brother and his wife at their small-scale urban farm in January 2022 and is in her third season. They deliver weekly produce boxes to 150 families, as well as provide produce to a local restaurant and a grocery store. In her free time, she likes to ride her bike, work on jigsaw puzzles, and knit. And I will pass it to Alejandro.
I have the distinct honor of introducing Emily Burke. Emily is an environmental sociology PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She graduated from Creighton University in 2021 with majors in sociology and justice and society, and minors in sustainability, theology, and graphic design. In her time at Creighton, she led a successful fossil fuel divestment movement uh, and a student sustainability group, the Green Jays. She currently works for Catholic Climate Covenant as the social media manager and young adult program assistant. In her free time, Emily enjoys camping, reading, and experimenting with plant-based recipes. I also have the pleasure of introducing Henry Glynn. Henry is a high school social studies teacher and cross-country coach at St. Joseph Academy in Brownsville, Texas. As a member of the University of Notre Dame's ACE Teaching Fellows Master's Program in Education as well. He graduated from Creighton University in 2023 with majors in political science and theology and a minor in justice and peace. He has worked with Catholic Climate Covenant since 2022 as an advocacy intern, policy advisor, and Common Home Corps advisor. Originally from a small town in Northeast Kansas, Henry loves all things outdoors and is dedicated to spreading the church's teaching on climate change and work towards climate solutions. Our next phase is a few questions that we have for the distinct and honorable panelists, and I'll pass it down to, I believe, Annalise.
Yeah, so our first question for our panelists, and feel free to hop in whenever, is going to be, how did you get to where you are today? And what is your background in education, and climate change and action?
I can go ahead and start. I didn't know much about climate change when I got to college. I knew it was a problem. I had go green stickers on my laptop, that kind of thing. So I did have a little bit of, knowing that it was important. But I elected to take a class on climate change and Catholic social teaching at Creighton. I think it fulfilled a theology credit or something. So it was a little bit by happenstance. But that class went through a ton of climate science and then a ton of the pairing with Catholic social teaching to say hey, as Catholics, it's our obligation to care about this issue. It affects future generations. It affects poor people and vulnerable people more immediately, more severely, all of these things. And once those dots were connected for me, I had a lot of sleepless nights. There was a couple week span while I was taking that class where I just felt super hopeless, a little bit jaded that I hadn't heard all of this up until this point. I've been a Catholic all my life, and I had never heard anything so explicit. And so at a Catholic university, I started talking to some of the other students in that class, are you having the same experience? Did you already know this coming in? Now that we know this, what could we possibly do? And that's how a lot of my involvement started. It was honestly talking to other students about sort of the emotions of learning these things and knowing these things, and the necessity or the feeling to do something. And now that we knew those things, we couldn't just sort of stand by. So that kind of started a lot of it for me, and the relationships that I built helped me to start organizations, join organizations, and then that led to a bunch of other sort of things that I've accomplished in this space. So that's how it started for me. So take interesting classes, even if, it sounds like all of you are interested in climate change already, so that's fantastic that you're going in with that mindset. But even classes that have sort of like an intersection with climate change and something that you may not be familiar with, I would say go for it, because that's how you learn and that's how you meet other people who are interested in those things as well.
I could go next. So for the better part of my adult life, about the past 5 years, I've had my hands in the dirt, and I've been engaged in with my local microclimate. First in Lockport at Nativity House, and more recently at Storey Family Farm. I was never as captivated as many of my peers with the big picture of climate change. The existential crisis, which I believe is real, was never my main motivating factor. I was inspired by my love of nature and the places that I've lived. Especially for the past few years, I've been engaged in biologically intensive regenerative farming. Many people call it agroecology, and I've been learning about collaborating with nature on a human scale to increase biodiversity, improve soil health and fertility, sequester carbon, and so on. And I've learned more about collaborating with nature to benefit the climate, and my love for the place where I am has grown, and my desire to better serve the environment has grown too. So, yeah.
Awesome. I can hop in next. Thanks for having me today and for everybody watching this. Hi. I, like Emily, was kind of able to enter into this space by getting pretty lucky and being around the right people. So at Creighton, similar story. I've been Catholic all my life. I grew up in farm country in Northeast Kansas. No stoplights, no restaurants in my small town, like a very small place. And I encountered this class, just like the intro theology class at Creighton, and we read Laudato Si for the first time. And I had never been exposed to a church document that sounded anything like that. And it really kind of made me question my own relationship with the outdoors and with nature. And then then it spiraled into this like 2-year long vocational discernment about like, what am I doing with myself? And like, am I really supposed to go to law school if this is such a big deal? And then I had two kind of powerful experiences that turned it on its head in college for me. I was able to spend a summer working on an organic farm and teaching at a preschool in East Africa, in Tanzania. And that was a summer of silence and prayer and sort of recognition that this crisis is one that that is existential, right? And is scientific, but it's also, like Becca was mentioning, it's very on the ground. It impacts people every day, right? Especially those people that the church is called to and that we are all called to serve. And be in solidarity with. So that experience transitioned into a really lucky opportunity over the past 2 years to spend working with Catholic Climate Covenant. I got to move to Washington, D.C. and work there. And then I worked virtually for the Covenant for a long time. I still do. And it's a blessing to be part of this. So I feel like most of my education in climate change and action has been sort of in practice, which, like Emily said, take classes that are interesting, but also don't be afraid of just going to the community meeting or spending a morning at the community garden or listening to somebody. If you have a creation care team at your parish, like going and sitting in, or sort of any of these different avenues for learning about climate change and then taking part in climate action that can really snowball until this just becomes a part of your life and how you operate.
I can go ahead and go next. My Wi-Fi is a little spotty, so if I do end up cutting out, please let me know. And I can go ahead and join on my phone. But really happy to be here. My name is Paco. How I started, so I grew up Catholic. I've always been Catholic. Didn't always have the best relationship with my faith. I come from like a really sort of conservative Latino household, and would kind of be forced to go to church, and so never really had that healthy relationship with God until I got to high school. I went to Verbum Day Jesuit High School in LA. It's like a Jesuit high school, and really loved the experience. And that's where I really learned to see my spirituality in the everyday, see my spirituality through my interactions with people, and most importantly, view my call as a person of faith, as a Catholic, to love not only on the interpersonal level, but also on the social level. And so when I got to college, I started getting involved in different clubs and organizations that do advocacy with different organizations off campus and on campus. But I kind of always wanted to go to law school, be an immigration attorney. And it wasn't until I took a trip to DC that I learned just how impactful it is to be involved in advocacy and political advocacy in particular. And so started getting involved in different campaigns, different advocacy campaigns, different elections campaigns in Los Angeles. Really loved what I was doing and ended up building a network and getting different internships, different opportunities. Got to meet some really incredible people, and now climate change is something particularly new for me. Similar to Emily, I took a course on Laudato Si and Carry for the Poor with the amazing theologian Dr. Cecilia Gonzalez, Dr. Cecilia Gonzalez Andrew, who just taught me so much and has been my mentor for the past few years, and started getting more involved in climate action. First with the Catholic Climate Covenant as a Common Home Core leader, and now kind of by sheer luck, getting chosen to be on the environmental portfolio for Senator Alfonso Butler, who's from California. I didn't mark the environment as my top issue, but it kind of just came to be. But I'm still happy to be here and happy to be working on that. So hope none of that cut out. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question for you all. This is something I've definitely noticed at the high school level. The nature, I feel like, of environmental advocacy is building a long-lasting movement and building community, but you're only in college or high school for 4 years. So how can environmentally active college students maximize a long-term impact and really build that climate resilient community over just 4 years? Do you have any advice for making long-lasting, effective change?
I can go ahead and go first again. So a lot of the environmental and climate change work that I did in college was very much like social movement based. So a lot of the fossil fuel divestment work that we did was a student movement that started with conversations among students like, hey, what exactly can we do here? Like, what power do we have as college students? And that spiraled into, let's ask our university, nicely to divest first. And when they said no, what can we do to sort of push them? What can we do to make sure that this injustice, doesn't just sort of lie silent? So a lot of the work that we did was very much like organizing and deciding like what's the most strategic move and things like that. And when work is in that sort of social movement vein, it's so easy for it to just be dropped when the students graduate. So I would say, and I learned this by doing this, we didn't know this at first, but it was a really good lesson to, as we sort of, we had students across all sort of grades or all years in college, which was really helpful because I was, when we started, one of the youngest members. And then a lot of the other sort of leaders graduated, and like I was a little bit on my own for a while. So it was a really good lesson to make sure that you have students across all years. But then as you invite new members, sort of take those members along with you as far as like how to run a meeting, who do we know are sort of like professors or faculty members or staff members on campus who are allies, who gets it more so, that you can go to for advice and things like that, because those are all things that we learned along the way, but any new members didn't have those lessons. So being really good about taking notes outside of class, to like sort of document the work that you're doing. If you're running an organization or you're a president or a leader of some sort in a club, making sure that you take really good records so that you can pass them down. And also, like, as younger members join, sort of electing to have those younger members take up leadership positions or at least accompany you in leadership positions so that the longevity of the organization or the movement or whatever it is can sort of be solidified. So my advice to freshmen or sophomores or early sort of college students would be to like go up and talk to the leaders of the organizations that you want to be a part of. If it's something that's super interesting to you and you know that maybe not as a freshman, but later on in your college career, you want to be a leader of that organization, it's great to sort of form those relationships early, ask those kinds of questions so that you can sort of learn lessons along the way and then take on those leadership roles.
I can jump next and segue from Emily's. Emily and I've done lots of work together, which is awesome because as you just heard, like she's so good at the social movement kind of like theory and idea and bringing people along. My work in this area has focused a little bit more on how can we make this more efficient? Because you're gonna go to colleges in the fall, or high schools right now where you might be a part of 3 or 4 or 5 clubs. And there's lots of things that you care about, and you're taking classes, and you want to do well at that, and you want to have time to like call your family and go for a run occasionally, and like read a book, and like see this needs to be streamlined. And so my advice is to certainly like do all of the things that Emily just said, bring people in and make power maps and do other things, but really drill down because you do not. I mean, right. Our generation is interestingly positioned, right? Because the challenges that climate change poses are more significant now than ever before. But there have also been people doing this work for a long time now, for 50 years, even before. And the church has something to say about it, but also just like popular culture and government officials and other people have things to say about this. So there's established methods and ways of doing things, right? So like a concrete example of how to streamline this is that if you're power mapping your university and saying like, well, who has the power to make this decision? If it's divestment, for example, then you don't need to waste your time with 4 or 5 or 6 different meetings talking about like, well, I wonder who we should talk to, because if you know who you should talk to, then you can make a really convincing argument to that one person, right? So I would also say, and somebody else might say this later, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping in on your thing, but don't underestimate your power as a student, especially if you're operating with other students, right? Universities exist to serve students, right? Instead of high schools. So it's an important thing for a university to not only just see that they have environmentally active college students, but then also see that those students are serious about making change in an efficient and effective way, knowing that they're there for 4 years, but you should have it's almost like the university should be asking you like, well, why do you care what happens after your 4 years? And then you can kind of give a little piece of your heart to the university. Well, I care so much about being here and that this is such a large issue that I want to make change here. So you're transient, but you can also be a permanent part of the place that you are.
I can go ahead and kind of hop in next. I have to constantly remind myself about this because I'm very much so like not a social person, more of an introvert. And the reality is like a lot of this work you can't do by yourself. I mean, whether it's joining like a club or a coalition or a group, or power mapping together, like Emily and Henry were saying, like there's only so much you can do by yourself. And oftentimes, especially when looking at something as big as this sort of climate crisis that we're looking at, it can get kind of depressing and it can get kind of sad. Just realizing like, okay, maybe by 2050, if we don't get most of the countries or most of the world's institutions to become net zero, like we'll have really understanding. Like, yes, that's tough to hear and tough to understand. But if we work together, we can get there. But also, like, let's take a moment, do some self-care, and really understand, like, maybe in the next 4 years, we might not get there, but we can get some progress along the way. Gonna echo off of what Emily was saying, like learning from people who are sort of leading things on campus. I was not too involved at LMU sort of in environmental movements, but I did take full advantage of where we have like immersion trip experiences that I'm sure most universities offer, where we get to visit sort of other countries, other communities, either in the university area or in the US or in other countries that focus on like environmental justice, learn from different nonprofits and organizations. I got to go to Costa Rica and really see the beauty of nature out there, and sort of in my understanding how I view my relationship with God through nature and sort of the beauty of creation. So also important to recognize, like, even after your 4 years in college end, that doesn't mean that your sort of advocacy or climate journey has to end. You can still stay involved in your community, sort of. You can serve like on a youth council. I know right now the Environmental Protection Agency just started its first like youth council where different folks from all across the country can be a part of. Right now, there's a bill in Congress trying to make it so that different environmentally related departments have like a youth council. So like taking full advantage of opportunities like that is extremely important, making sure that our voices are heard. But yeah, really stressing on the fact like we can't do this alone. We shouldn't do this alone. I mean, the Catholic Church is, I mean, its own name, like Catholic Universal, calling us to have solidarity with each other, with other folks in our beautiful God's planet. So my advice, I guess, would be really build relationships, keep them strong, also take care of yourself, and like making sure to do this work out of love, love for creation, love for your neighbor, love for family and friends. Because when you do it out of hate, you really just can't sustain yourself.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things about, caring for the environment, is falling in love with the environment where you are and striving to develop a peer relationship with the earth. This idea comes from a writer named Steve Rinella, and in his book about raising kids who love the earth, he says, if we want our kids to feel a true and pragmatic sense of stewardship for the environment, we need to let them to relate to it as a peer, as something that they're entwined with. In other words, our kids need to understand that they are not above, outside, or apart from their physical environment. They're completely entwined with it and with them. So to find some activity or hobby that helps you build a peer relationship with an actual place. Learn the names of the birds on your campus, the kinds of fish in the local lake, the insects in the forest preserve. You'll be so much more likely to respect and defend and to advocate for a place that you love rather than for some abstract ideal.
Thank you. Thank you guys for all those wise words. I have one more question for you guys, but before that, I just want to remind for those that have just joined or joined a little bit later, that we will have an open Q&A session. So if you'd like, please put in your questions in the chat. But my question for you guys is, with respect to where you see yourself in the next 5 years, what are your sustainability and faith goals? And what advice would you give to young people, young activists, on setting those goals and achieving them?
I guess I can go ahead and get started on this one. Kind of feels like an interview question, like where do you see yourself in 5 years? I would say just personally, on a personal level, in terms of sustainability, I really started learning about, I mean, I didn't even know what climate change or climate action was until about my junior year in college. So you all listening to this call already, being on this call, you're already many steps ahead of probably me and other folks on this call. So I recently started getting my family and I to start composting, to start recycling more often. I got a Brita filter instead of using an exorbitant amount of like water bottles, just to minimize like my own personal sort of usage of different single-use plastics. I've also been trying to like drive less and like try to take the bus more often. I would say personally in the next 5 years, I hope to continue sort of keeping up that like simplicity lifestyle. Like, how do I make sure that I'm not wasting as much as I could? Thinking about convenience, like how can I make it, or instead of using one item for like one time, how can I keep maximizing that and keep sort of keep my carbon footprint low, my eco footprint low. Also would hope that I can continue sharing that with folks, getting my friends to do it, getting people in my church to do it, people in different like spaces that I'm in, getting people that I work with to do it by then. In terms of my faith, I hope to continue growing. I have not tried meeting with a spiritual sort of coordinator, I think is the term, or a spiritual
Director.
spiritual director. Thank you. I've never tried that. I mean, I didn't even know what spiritual direction was until not too long ago. So I'm hoping to maybe continue in hopefully growing my faith out, trying out new things, going on something called like a silent retreat that I've been invited to so many times, but always been too scared to take that first leap. And then in terms of my advocacy journey, I hope in the next 5 years to continue joining different coalitions, different groups, learning of different organizations doing the important work necessary to like make sure that our planet is saved, make sure that we can continue caring for God's planet. And I know there's so many out here in DC, so many where I'm from in Los Angeles, so many all over the country, and just learning as much as I can, educating others, and really joining in on efforts, even something as small as like signing a petition, or something as big as like, I don't know, going to go testify somewhere or having a advocacy meeting with a representative. And so those are kind of just some of my goals, sort of short term and long term, yeah, for the next 5 years.
Yeah, in the next 5 years, my family's farm, I hope to move out to the country, still serving this area, but expanding the garden a bit. Right now we're on just like about an acre and a half. Well, we're farming on 3/4 of an acre. Then we have our greenhouse. So expanding that and just continuing to produce local organic vegetables and really care for our soil, improve that, and just, yeah, support this local community with our work. So I don't really want to change that too much, but hopefully just expand it and do more of that. And in terms of faith, I have a lot of family in town. I have 10 nieces and nephews here, and I just really want to continue to grow and be a great example of a steward of God's creation and just a practicing Catholic, and really show them how much your faith brings you, and you know how important it is to love your faith and to you know show it to your community. So
I can go ahead and go next. In the next 5 years, which does kind of feel like an interview question, I hope to be done with my PhD. So I hope to be at that point a sociology professor. And my sociology professors at Creighton were hugely impactful for my own sort of vocational discernment, my own decisions to go to grad school, what to prioritize, things like that. So I hope I can fill that same role for students in colleges, or a college, I suppose. As far as my faith, I feel like I am a young Catholic who is very proud to be a young Catholic and very proud to sort of occupy this Catholic and climate change space. But a lot of other young Catholics that I am surrounded by sort of don't feel that same like encouragement or sort of motivation to keep trying to push the church to do better and to prioritize issues that are important to young Catholics and things like that. So it's an interesting spot to be in. And I think my goal for myself and my own faith is to sort of lead by example and show other young Catholics why it's valuable to still sort of be Catholic and be, you know, an active voice in the church, to push the church to do more good and to sort of live up to its own mission. So yeah, I think that's my next 5 years, kind of lofty goals, but it's okay.
3 really inspiring answers to a really important question. I can try. I think in the next 5 years, sustainability and faith goals, hopefully will kind of define my next 5 years in a way. I'm continuing my master's program in education until next spring. So I'll be headed back to the border to Brownsville to teach a second year of high school social studies this year. And I am blessed with the opportunity to add a class this year on religion and ecology. So I'll teach Laudato Si, Laudate Deum, some of this advocacy techniques and organizing methods and other things that we've been talking about here today, and kind of couple it with on the ground community garden and pollinator garden experiences at school, and teach students how all of this can go and where it can go after high school. So I'm really looking forward to that challenge. This has been a really inspiring 40 minutes for me to kind of be thinking about next year. As far as myself, I think I see a future in education. I'm not sure if that's classroom or at a building or district or kind of an educational policy leadership level, but I do know that climate education and action is something that will continue to kind of inform and drive all of my work. My faith, I'm incredibly blessed and proud to have a strong faith that informs all of my decisions. So a commitment, especially to this church that I care for so deeply, and that has so far to go on living out its own teaching, right? And living into the authenticity and the culture of encounter that Pope Francis asks us to foster. So I'm not giving up on my students, on education, or on this hope for the future as far as the climate crisis goes. I think we can do it. And any advice that I might have about your own goal setting, like I think Paco said it earlier, it's amazing that you all are here or watching this. That's an incredible first step that I was not ready for in high school or even in the first couple of years of college. So commend yourself for that. And then recognize that there are other people in this space. This is not work that you should or can do alone. We're stronger together. So don't be afraid to reach out and go to more things like this and get to know great people.
Thank you to all our panelists. We are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. So if we've got any questions that anyone wants to drop in the chat, we've already got one. Yeah, we'll move into that section. So panelists, again, you can jump in, but our first question is going to be, what gives you hope despite the climate crisis?
I can get us started on this one as well. I feel like this sounds like a very generic answer that a lot of folks of an older generation typically say, but it's true. I mean, it's young people, it's youth, just like me, you, everyone on this call, friends, people around me. Before getting involved in advocacy at all, kind of bought into the rhetoric that like, oh, young people don't care about politics or elections or advocacy or what's going on in the world. But then I started getting involved in just local things around housing, around immigration, around economic security, and the amount of young people that I saw in these spaces in Los Angeles, across the state of California, in the US has been incredible. I mean, I'm out here in DC right now and I'm looking around and like there's so many interns and it's beautiful to see. There's so many like recent grads working on Capitol Hill, and it's like it's really young people who want to bring about that change and young people who care about like our future. I mean, I've said it before, we're like Earth, this planet, it's not only our common home, it's also our future. It's where we're gonna live, and we know that. And so it gives me hope to see young people taking up space, seeing leaders sort of amplify the voices of young people like Pope Francis, like different US senators, including the current US senator I'm interning for, LaFonza Butler, who has like literally committed her entire term just to amplifying the voice of young people creating a youth council, meeting with young people on the regular. And so that's just really helpful and giving me hope for the future, especially when seeing like how much biodiversity we're losing across the world, the impacts of global warming, climate change. I mean, just looking at even the intersections, I'm really passionate about immigration, looking at the US-Mexico border and the war on water that's going to be coming up soon. Just like how to access that, how to get to that. But as young people, I mean, people oftentimes push us down because they think that we either don't care or aren't ready or aren't equipped to be leaders of today. But we really are leaders of today, and I'm seeing it every day here and now. So.
Somewhat similarly, the young people, we serve 150 families in our local community, and a lot of them are also Catholic families here in South Bend. And we get, little messages from kids who thank us for growing all these vegetables, and just that so many people would support what we do just gives me so much hope, because we are caring for the earth with these organic practices, with this type of farming that we do. And we're not the only farm in South Bend doing this. We have, I think there's 4 that I know of, 4 organic small scale urban farms here. So just yeah, the community that we have here in South Bend, supporting their local agriculture, caring for creation in that way, just is so hopeful.
I'd say similar to both answers that have already been given. I have really found hope in being in community, being with other people, young and old, doing climate work. When I first started getting into even learning about climate change, deciding sort of what it would look like to act on it, to join things like that. Like I said early on, I had a period where I felt super hopeless. I think I just sort of felt this like crushing pressure of how big the issue is. It's so sort of wide ranging. There's so many different facets of environmental degradation, climate change included, and even that is such a big problem. And I just like, as one person, as a young person, as a student, I felt so small, and I just felt like there was nothing I could do that would like make a difference, and people around me weren't talking about it or acting on it that I was seeing, and it was just like super isolating. I felt super hopeless. And once I started getting involved in things and, like I said, building relationships with other people who did see this as like a super pressing problem, a problem worth acting on, that's where I got more energy, more hope, more sort of motivation to keep going. I think doing climate work can sometimes be super draining. It's, like I said, a big problem that you feel like you yourself can never solve, or like anything that you do as a group from a university level or even from an advocacy level, like no one action can solve the problem, right? But by being in community, by having people in your corner who also value the issue, sort of are acting on it for the same reasons that you're acting on it, is super helpful, because then you know that you don't have to shoulder the whole problem yourself, right? There's other people that want to work on it sort of alongside you, and you can feed off of them and work together with them. But also, once you're in community, you start realizing how many people really are doing something, how many people really are acting from their own interests, from their own priorities, from their own sort of angles on the issue. And then it sort of paints a bigger picture of all of the people who are working on this and, want to see a better future for themselves, for their grandkids, all of that kind of stuff. So being in community, not isolating myself, that gives me hope, despite how big the problem is and how desolate it might seem. There's always good news among all of the despair news.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add to those 3. I think All of the points that were made are really important. I draw my hope from people like Kayla and Diana who have dedicated their careers to this, or people like Emily who's studying this, people like Paco who's like doing this on the ground work on Capitol Hill, or people like my students or like you all like invested in this, right? And especially people working to actually make this happen in local communities like Becca. So we can't, there are so many pieces to this puzzle. And we can't forget about each other when we're doing this work. I think that's the most important thing for me, and that really keeps me going, is that every time we bring somebody into this circle, there's a greater possibility and impact of them going out and impacting more people to bring more people into the circle, right? That's the Catholic Church. I think the church is well positioned to face this problem head on and solve it in a just manner. And I'm looking forward to being part of that for my whole life.
Awesome, thank you all. I have a specific question for Emily. Could you tell us more about your PhD work, and what that's been like?
Yeah, I definitely can. So I am in an environmental sociology program, and my specific research interest, so everybody comes into the program with specific interests and they do their own research. If they don't come in with a master's, they sort of get a master's along the way. I just got mine at the beginning of the summer, so that's exciting. And then you go on to your PhD work, you essentially do research and write a dissertation, which is like a multi-year project. But my specific research interests that I came in knowing and have sort of continued on is Catholics and climate change, which is very fitting for this space. So in undergrad, I did research on the US Catholic bishops and what they have and haven't said about climate change. So I worked with some faculty members at Creighton. And then once I got to grad school and I sort of started doing my own independent research, I've studied lay Catholics who want to address climate change. So I've worked with some lay Catholics who have creation care teams and sort of their work in a diocese and what that looks like at a parish level, at a diocese level, what they prioritize or what motivates them, where they sort of come up to roadblocks and like how they sort of work through that. So I think my dissertation is going to be in the same vein, looking at Catholic leaders and laity and what where energy is around climate change, where sort of roadblocks are in the church and why change isn't happening faster. I think the like year-old saying of like for Catholics, like change is just slow and everything is slow in the Catholic Church. Personally, I don't think that climate change is an issue that we can let that be an excuse. So I'm really interested and invested both personally and academically and in my own sort of faith life, in seeing that change be faster and seeing more people sort of see where these roadblocks are and what we can do about it as lay Catholics in the church. And yeah, thanks, Diana, for sharing that.
Thanks so much. Yeah, Diana shared a link in the chat of Emily's research. Do we have any more questions for our panelists as a whole or any individuals? If not, I can pass it off to who do we have wrapping us up? I think Alejandro. Yeah, we've got just a few more minutes left, so if you want to take it.
Sure, thank you. Well, on behalf of everybody who has had the opportunity to hear you four give some wise words, some sabiduría, as we say in Spanish, or wisdom, I would like to thank you for being a part of this, for sharing your knowledge, your experiences, your goals, your advice, everything, your faith-based, all of it. It was great. I know that I'm a facilitator, and even I was kind of perplexed and fascinated about and kind of lost in what you guys have said. So thank you. And for our audience members, present or present in the future, thank you for hearing and for attending and for being in community with us. Um, the Catholic Climate Covenant, I know, is grateful for your presence. Diana, if you have anything to add about future events.
Yes, thanks, Alejandro. And thank you also to Annalise and Elizabeth for your facilitation of this conversation. It's meaningful to have this entire group here. So my name's Diana. I work alongside Kayla at Catholic Climate Covenant as the Young Adult Mobilization Program Manager. And I just want to uplift one way that you could get involved with Catholic Climate Covenant through a program called Homemakers. So I'll just briefly share my screen and just share a touch about Homemakers. Homemakers is an integral ecology curriculum. It was written by young adults for young adults, including by Emily Burke. There was a group of about 30 or so young adults who created this curriculum. It's a way to learn like a 101 on climate science and a 101 on Catholic social teaching around care for creation. We provide the entire resource available for you for free. It's something that you could use in small groups, in like among a group of friends, or in your campus, or in your church. It's available for download. And we're going to have a facilitator training in early July. On Wednesday, July 7th, around 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. I've included the registration link here. And you could also just always email me if you have a question about Homemakers or you want to get involved in some way around care for creation as you move on from high school. Please keep in touch and feel free to reach out. Really happy to support you, and know that at the Covenant we have resources like Homemakers, but then also just folks who want to accompany you alongside the journey and brainstorm and be with you as you engage in further care for creation efforts. So that's all that I have on my end. Shall I pass it back to you, Kayla?
Sure. I could close this in a prayer. In the name of the Fathers. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing us all together here. Please bless all of the people on this call, and Holy Spirit, please just direct us in the future as we work together to care for your common home. Amen.